The alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 a.m., but 16-year-old twins Jake and Zoe were already wide awake. They had been lying in their beds for the past hour, too excited to sleep. Today was the day they had been waiting for since their birthday 3 months ago. Their first solo flight. No parents, no supervision, just them traveling across the country to visit their beloved grandmother in Atlanta. "Are you nervous?" Zoe whispered to her brother as they got dressed in their matching navy blue outfits their mother had picked out the night before. Jake adjusted his tie and grinned. "A little, but mostly excited. Grandma Rosa is going to flip when she sees us walking off that plane by ourselves." Their mother, Dr. Rebecca Williams, was already in the kitchen making breakfast when they came downstairs. She was dressed in her scrubs, ready for another long day at the hospital where she worked as a heart surgeon. The twins could see she was trying to hide her own nervousness behind her usual morning routine. "Okay, you two," she said, placing plates of scrambled eggs and toast in front of them. "Let's go over everything one more time." Jake rolled his eyes playfully. "Mom, we've been through this 100 times. "Humor me," she said, sitting down with her coffee. "Your boarding passes are in the front pocket of your backpacks. Your IDs are in the same pocket. You have snacks, water bottles, phone chargers, and emergency cash." Zoe nodded, taking a bite of her eggs. "And we have Grandma's phone number memorized, plus it's saved in our phones. We know to stay together at all times and to ask for help if we need it." "And what do you do if there's any problem with your seats or boarding?" their mother asked. "We show them our tickets and explain that Dad arranged everything through his work benefits," Jake replied. "And if they still don't believe us, we call you or Dad." Their father had left for a business trip 2 days earlier, but he had made sure everything was perfect for their journey. As a vice president at the airline, he had access to special perks and had gotten them seats in the premium section. He wanted their first flying experience to be comfortable and memorable. Dr. Williams looked at her watch. "All right, finish up. We need to leave in 15 minutes to beat the morning traffic." The drive to Chicago O'Hare International Airport took 45 minutes, and the twins spent most of it staring out the windows at the city waking up. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in soft pink and orange colors. They passed other cars filled with people heading to work, but Jake and Zoe felt like they were part of something special, something different. "Remember, there," Mother said as they pulled into the departure area, "your flight board's at 9:15, and you need to be at the gate at least 30 minutes early. Gate B12. Don't forget." She helped them get their luggage from the trunk, 2 matching black suitcases that weren't too heavy but looked grown up and professional. The twins had packed them carefully the night before, with their mother checking everything twice. "We've got this, Mom," Zoe said, giving her a tight hug. "Don't worry about us." "I'm a surgeon," Dr. Williams laughed, though her voice was a little shaky. "I save lives every day, but letting my babies fly alone is the scariest thing I've ever done." Jake hugged her next. "We'll text you as soon as we land. Promise." They watched their mother drive away, waving until her car disappeared into the traffic. Then they looked at each other and grinned. "We're really doing this," Zoe said. "We're really doing this," Jake agreed. The airport was already busy, even though it was still early morning. Business travelers rushed past with their rolling suitcases, families with young children struggled with car seats and diaper bags, and college students sat on the floor charging their phones. The twins had been to airports before, but always with their parents. Walking through those automatic doors by themselves felt like stepping into a whole new world. Check-in was easier than they expected. The automated kiosks printed their boarding passes without any problems, and the bag drop line moved quickly. The security agent who checked their IDs smiled at them. "First time flying alone?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Zoe replied politely. "You'll do great. Have a wonderful trip." Security took a little longer. Jake had forgotten to take his phone charger out of his backpack and had to go through the scanner twice. But the TSA agents were patient and helpful, and soon they were gathering their belongings on the other side. Gate B12, Jake read from their boarding passes as they walked through the terminal. That way. They had almost 2 hours before their flight, so they decided to explore a little. The airport was like a small city with restaurants, shops, and even a bookstore. They bought hot chocolate from a coffee shop and found a quiet spot to sit and people watch. "Look at all these people," Zoe said, sipping her drink. "They're all going somewhere different. Some are probably going home, some are going on vacation, some are traveling for work like Dad." Jake nodded, watching a family with 3 small children trying to keep everyone together. "I wonder if any of them are as excited as we are." An elderly man sitting nearby overheard them and chuckled. "First flight?" he asked kindly. "First flight alone," Jake said proudly. "Well, that's something special. I've been flying for 40 years and I still get a little thrill every time the plane takes off." "Where are you headed?" "Atlanta to see our grandmother," Zoe explained. "She's going to be so proud of you two," the man said. "Flying alone at your age shows real maturity." As the time got closer to boarding, they made their way toward Gate B12. The gate area was filling up with other passengers, and they found 2 seats near the windows where they could watch the planes taking off and landing. Jake pulled out his phone and took a selfie of them both. "For Mom and Dad," he explained, sending it to the family group chat with the message, "At the gate and ready to fly." Their mother responded immediately with heart emojis and, "So proud of you both." Their father, despite being in meetings all morning, managed to send back, "Have an amazing flight. Can't wait to hear all about it. Flight 847 to Atlanta will begin boarding in approximately 15 minutes, came the announcement over the intercom. "We'll start with our premium passengers and those needing special assistance." The twins looked at each other with growing excitement. This was it. In a few minutes, they would be walking onto their first plane as independent travelers. They checked their boarding passes one more time, making sure they had everything ready. "Premium passengers, we're ready to begin boarding Flight 847 to Atlanta," the gate agent announced. Jake and Zoe stood up, grabbed their backpacks, and walked confidently toward the gate. They had their boarding passes in hand, their IDs ready, and smiles on their faces. What could possibly go wrong? Jake and Zoe walked toward the gate counter with confident smiles, their boarding passes held out ready to scan. They had watched other premium passengers go through the process smoothly just moments before. The gate agent, a middle-aged woman, with short blonde hair and a name tag reading Patricia, was busy typing on her computer. "Good morning," Zoe said politely as they approached. "We're ready to board." Patricia looked up from her screen and her expression immediately changed. Her friendly, professional smile disappeared, replaced by a look of suspicion. She glanced at the twins, then at their boarding passes, then back at them again. "Hold on, just a minute," Patricia said, her voice sharp. "Where exactly do you think you're going?" Jake blinked, confused by the sudden change in tone. "We're boarding the flight to Atlanta, Flight 847. "I can see that," Patricia said, reaching out to take their boarding passes. She held them up to the light, examining them closely as if they might be fake. "But these are premium seats, row 3A and 3B. "Yes, ma'am," Zoe replied, still trying to stay polite despite feeling uncomfortable. "Our father arranged everything through his work." Patricia let out a short laugh that wasn't friendly at all. "Your father? And what exactly does your father do that he can afford seats like these?" The twins exchanged glances. Something was definitely wrong here. The other passengers who had boarded before them hadn't been questioned like this. Jake cleared his throat and tried again. "He works for the airline," Jake explained. "He used his employee benefits to get us these seats." "Employee benefits?" Patricia's voice got louder, drawing attention from nearby passengers. "Do you have any idea how much these seats cost? We're talking about seats that cost more than most people make in a week." Zoe felt her cheeks getting hot with embarrassment. People were starting to stare, and she could hear whispers from the waiting area behind them. "Ma'am, if you could just scan our passes, you'll see everything is legitimate." "Legitimate?" Patricia practically shouted now. "You kids think you can just waltz up here with stolen boarding passes and I won't notice?" "Stolen?" Jake's voice cracked with shock. "These aren't stolen. Our mom dropped us off this morning. We have our IDs, we went through security. Everything was fine until now." Patricia waved their boarding passes in the air. "I've been doing this job for 15 years. Kid, I know a scam when I see one. These tickets weren't paid for by you two, that's for sure." An older man in line behind them spoke up. "Excuse me, but is there a problem?" These young people seem to have their paperwork in order. Patricia whirled around to face him. Sir, I need you to step back. This is airline business, and I'm handling it. But they're just kids trying to board their flight, a woman with a baby added. What's the big deal? The big deal, Patricia said, her voice carrying across the entire gate area now, is that someone is playing games here. These kids are trying to board with fraudulent tickets. Jake felt his heart pounding. This was turning into a nightmare. Ma'am, please, if we could just call our parents to sort this out. Oh, I'm sure you'd love to call your accomplices, Patricia snapped. Nice try, but I wasn't born yesterday. Zoe's eyes started to fill with tears, but she blinked them back. We're not lying, our dad really does work for the airline. His name is David Thompson and he's… David Thompson? Patricia interrupted with another harsh laugh. You kids are really committed to this story, aren't you? Let me guess, your dad is the CEO too? No, he's the vice president of operations, Jake said quietly, his voice barely audible now. This made Patricia laugh even harder. The vice president of operations? Oh, that's rich. And I suppose your mother is the Queen of England? More passengers were gathering now, some recording on their phones. The twins could hear people murmuring to each other, some expressing sympathy, others seeming to enjoy the drama. Jake wished he could disappear into the floor. Listen here, kids, Patricia continued, seeming to enjoy the attention she was getting. I don't know who put you up to this little scheme, but it ends now. Premium seats are for premium passengers, not for kids running some kind of con game. We're not running any con game, Zoe said, her voice stronger now despite her tears. We're 16 years old, we're traveling to see our grandmother, and our father bought these tickets legally. 16? Patricia looked them up and down with obvious disbelief. You kids barely look old enough to tie your own shoes, let alone afford seats that cost $800 each. A businessman in an expensive suit stepped forward. Ma'am, I fly every week for work and I've never seen gate agents treat passengers like this. These children have done nothing wrong that I can see. Patricia's face turned red with anger. Sir, if you don't step back and mind your own business, I'll have you removed from this flight as well. I know how to do my job, and my job is to prevent fraud. But what fraud? The businessman pressed. They have boarding passes, they have identification, they went through security. What exactly is fraudulent here? Patricia pointed at Jake and Zoe. Look at them. Do they look like they belong in premium seating? Do they look like their family has the kind of money for these tickets? The gate area fell silent. Even the background noise of the busy airport seemed to fade as the weight of Patricia's words sank in. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably, and someone in the back could be heard saying, Oh no, she didn't just say that. Jake straightened his shoulders and looked Patricia directly in the eyes. Ma'am, we have every right to be here. We have valid tickets, valid identification, and we've done nothing wrong. Don't you take that tone with me, young man, Patricia shot back. I'm calling my supervisor and then we're calling security. We'll see what they have to say about your little game. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. Janet, I need you at gate B12 immediately. We have a situation with some kids trying to use fraudulent premium boarding passes. While Patricia was on the phone, Zoe whispered to her brother, Jake, I want to call Mom. Me too, he whispered back. But she's probably in surgery by now. What about Dad? He said he was in meetings all morning. But maybe. Patricia hung up the phone and crossed her arms. My supervisor is on her way. She's going to sort this out once and for all. A flight attendant who had been watching from nearby walked over. Patricia, is everything okay? The captain is asking why we haven't started general boarding yet. Everything will be fine once we remove these two troublemakers, Patricia replied loudly. They're trying to board with fake tickets. The flight attendant looked at Jake and Zoe with sympathy. They're just kids, Patricia. Are you sure there isn't some misunderstanding? I'm sure, Patricia said firmly. 15 years on this job and I can spot trouble from a mile away. Just then, a woman in an airline supervisor uniform approached the gate. Her name tag read, Janet Rodriguez. She looked harried and annoyed, at being called away from whatever she was doing. "What's the situation here, Patricia?" Janet asked. "These two kids are trying to board with premium passes they obviously didn't pay for," Patricia explained. "I think someone gave them stolen boarding passes, or they printed fake ones somehow." Janet looked at the twins, then at their boarding passes. She frowned and shook her head. "This is highly irregular. Kids this age don't usually travel alone in premium seating." "That's exactly what I said," Patricia agreed. "Something's not right here." Jake felt his last bit of hope fading away. Even the supervisor seemed to be against them. He looked around the gate area at all the people watching, some with their phones still recording, others shaking their heads, in disgust at what they were witnessing. "Please," Zoe said one more time, her voice small and defeated. "Can we just call our father? He can explain everything." Janet and Patricia exchanged looks. "Nice try, sweetie," Janet said with fake sympathy. "But we've heard every story in the book. Patricia, call airport security. Let's get this resolved so we can board this flight." As Patricia reached for her radio to call security, Jake closed his eyes and wished his father would somehow magically appear to fix this horrible situation. But that only happened in movies, right? Patricia lifted her radio to her mouth, ready to call airport security, when Janet put a hand on her arm. "Wait a second. Let me handle this properly." Janet turned to face the twins with a stern expression that made Jake's stomach drop even further. "All right, you two," Janet said, crossing her arms. "I'm going to give you one last chance to tell me the truth. Where did you really get these boarding passes?" Zoe wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "We already told you the truth. Our dad works for this airline. He got us these seats through his employee benefits." "Your dad works for the airline," Janet repeated slowly, as if she was talking to small children. "And what exactly does he do? Is he a baggage handler? Ground crew?" "He's the vice president of operations," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper now. Both Patricia and Janet burst out laughing. Other passengers in the gate area shifted uncomfortably at the mocking sound. "The vice president of operations," Janet exclaimed. "Patricia, did you hear that? These kids think we're complete idiots." "I heard it," Patricia replied, shaking her head. "The creativity of scammers these days never ceases to amaze me." A young woman with a laptop bag spoke up from the seating area. "Excuse me, but why don't you just call the Employee Services Department and verify it? If their father really works here, it would take 2 minutes to confirm." Janet turned to her with an annoyed expression. "Ma'am, I appreciate your input, but we know how to do our jobs. These children are clearly lying." "But how do you know that?" the woman pressed. "You haven't even tried to verify their story." "Because," Janet said loudly, "look at them. Does this look like an executive's family to you?" The gate area fell silent again. Even the constant announcements over the airport speakers seemed to pause. Jake felt like everyone was staring at them, judging them, deciding whether they belonged there or not. An elderly black man stood up from his seat near the window. His voice was calm but firm. "Young lady, I've been flying for over 50 years, and I've never seen airline employees treat passengers this way. These children have valid boarding passes and identification. What more do you need?" Patricia's face flushed red. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to stay out of this. This is airline business." This became everyone's business the moment. "You started shouting accusations across the gate," the man replied. "These kids are being humiliated for no good reason." "No good reason?" Patricia's voice got even louder. "They're trying to steal premium seats." "How are they stealing anything?" a mother holding a toddler asked. "They have tickets, they have IDs. They went through security just like everyone else." Janet stepped forward, trying to regain control of the situation. "Everyone, please calm down. We're handling this appropriately." "Appropriately?" The businessman from earlier shook his head. "This is the most inappropriate thing I've ever seen at an airport, and I fly 3 times a week." More passengers were pulling out their phones now, some taking pictures, others recording videos. Jake could hear someone behind them talking quietly on a phone call, probably telling someone about what they were witnessing. "You know what? Patricia said, looking around at all the disapproving faces. I don't care what any of you think. I'm doing my job, and my job is to prevent fraud. Your job is to help passengers, corrected a flight attendant who had been watching from the boarding door. And right now, you're preventing 2 kids from getting on a plane they have tickets for. Patricia whirled around to face her coworker. Lisa, don't you start with me too, I know what I'm doing. Do you? Lisa asked quietly. Because from where I'm standing it looks like you're harassing 2 teenagers. Zoe started crying again. No longer able to hold back her tears. The stress and embarrassment were too much. We just want to see our grandma, she said through her sobs. We didn't do anything wrong. Jake put his arm around his sister's shoulders, trying to comfort her while fighting back his own tears. He had never felt so helpless in his life. Please, just let us call our dad. He can explain everything. Your imaginary dad? Patricia mocked. The one who's supposedly a vice president? He's not imaginary, Jake shouted, his composure finally breaking. His name is David Thompson and he really does work here. Several passengers gasped at his outburst. The twins had been so polite and composed throughout the entire ordeal that seeing Jake finally lose his temper made everyone realize just how pushed to their limit they were. That's enough, Janet declared. Patricia, call security now. I want these kids removed from the gate area immediately. No, wait, the elderly man said, standing up again. You can't do this. They haven't done anything illegal. They're disrupting our boarding process, Janet replied, and they're using fraudulent documents. You don't know that they're fraudulent, the businesswoman with the laptop insisted. You're just assuming they are. I'm assuming based on 15 years of experience, Patricia said into her radio. Security to gate B12. We need assistance. With 2 unaccompanied minors causing a disturbance. The flight attendant named Lisa walked over to the twins. Hey, are you 2 okay? She asked gently. Zoe nodded, though she was still crying. We just want to go see our grandma. We've been planning this trip for months. I believe you, Lisa said softly. And I think this whole situation is completely out of line. Patricia overheard her. Lisa, if you don't stop undermining my authority, I'm going to report you to management. Go ahead, Lisa replied, because I'm definitely reporting this to management myself. Just then, 2 airport security officers appeared at the gate. They looked around at the crowd of passengers, many of whom were clearly upset, and approached Patricia and Janet with confusion on their faces. What's the situation here? The older security officer asked. Patricia pointed at Jake and Zoe. These 2 minors are trying to board with fraudulent premium boarding passes. We need them removed from the gate area. The security officer looked at the twins, then back at Patricia. Have you verified that the passes are fraudulent? Well, no, but have they caused any physical disturbance or threat? No, but they're disrupting. Ma'am, the security officer interrupted. If they have boarding passes and IDs and they haven't caused any actual disturbance, I'm not sure what you want us to do here. Janet stepped forward. Officer, these children are clearly using tickets they didn't pay for. Someone is running a scam here. The second security officer, a younger woman, looked at the twins with sympathy. Kids, do you want to tell me your side of the story? Jake wiped his eyes and tried to speak clearly. Our dad works for the airline. He got us these seats through his employee benefits. We have all our paperwork. We went through security. Everything was fine until we tried to board. And your dad's name? David Thompson. He's the vice president of operations. The female security officer pulled out her radio. Let me just check on that for you. Don't waste your time, Patricia said. They're making it up. But the security officer was already speaking into her radio. Operations, this is Officer Martinez at Gate B12. Can you confirm employment for a David Thompson in your department? Everyone waited in tense silence for the response. Jake held his breath, praying that someone would finally believe them. The seconds felt like hours as they waited for the radio to crackle back to life. Officer Martinez, that's affirmative. David Thompson is our vice president of operations. Is there a problem? The entire gate area seemed to freeze. Patricia's face went white. Janet's mouth fell open. The passengers who had been supporting the twins smiled with relief, while those who had been watching the drama unfold leaned forward to hear what would happen next. The security officer looked at Patricia and Janet with a very serious expression. "Ladies, I think we need to have a conversation about what exactly happened here." The security officer's radio confirmation hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Patricia stood frozen, her face turning from white to red as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Janet's hands were shaking as she stared at the twins, finally understanding the massive mistake they had made. "So," Officer Martinez said slowly, looking directly at Patricia, "it appears these children were telling the truth all along." Before Patricia could respond, there was a commotion near the gate entrance. Several airline employees were walking quickly toward them, and passengers were turning to look at something behind the crowd. Jake and Zoe, still holding on to each other, couldn't see what was happening through all the people. "Excuse me, coming through," came a deep, authoritative voice from the back of the gate area. "I need to get to the front, please." Passengers began stepping aside, creating a path. The voice was getting closer, and Jake felt his heart skip a beat. He knew that voice. It was impossible, but he knew it. "Dad?" Zoe whispered, hardly daring to believe it. Through the crowd came a tall, well-dressed black man in a perfectly tailored Navy suit. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone used to being in charge, but his eyes were scanning the crowd with obvious concern. When he spotted the twins, his expression immediately shifted from professional worry to parental alarm. "Jake, Zoe!" David Thompson called out, pushing through the last few passengers to reach his children. The twins broke away from the security officers and ran to their father, both talking at once through their tears. "Dad, we tried to tell them. They wouldn't believe us. They said we were lying. They called us scammers." David wrapped both his children in his arms, holding them tightly while his eyes took in the scene around him. The gate area was packed with passengers, many still recording on their phones. 2 security officers stood nearby, looking uncomfortable. And at the gate counter, 2 airline employees looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. "It's okay," David said softly to his children. "I'm here now. Everything's going to be okay." He looked up at Officer Martinez, who was walking over to them. "Officer, I'm David Thompson. I believe there's been some kind of misunderstanding involving my children." "Yes, sir, Mr. Thompson," Officer Martinez replied respectfully. "We've just confirmed your employment with the airline. It seems there was some confusion about your children's boarding passes." David's jaw tightened as he looked over at Patricia and Janet, who were both trying to avoid his gaze. "Confusion? What kind of confusion?" The older security officer stepped forward. "Sir, the gate agents believed your children were using fraudulent tickets. They were about to have them removed from the gate area." "Fraudulent tickets?" David's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it. "The tickets I personally arranged through my employee benefits? The tickets that were processed through our own system?" Patricia finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Mr. Thompson, we didn't know." "You didn't know what?" David asked, his attention now fully focused on her. "You didn't know that children could have premium tickets? You didn't know that our employees' families are entitled to travel benefits? Or you didn't know that you should verify information before accusing passengers of fraud?" Janet tried to step in. "Sir, we were just following protocol. When we see unusual situations, we're supposed to investigate." "Unusual situations?" David repeated, his voice still eerily calm. What exactly was unusual about 2 well-dressed teenagers with valid boarding passes and identification trying to board a flight? The question hung in the air. Everyone in the gate area knew the answer, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Lisa, the flight attendant who had defended the twins, approached the group. "Mr. Thompson, I witnessed the entire incident. Your children were nothing but polite and respectful, even when they were being accused of lying and fraud." "Thank you," David said to her, then turned back to Patricia and Janet. "I'd like to hear exactly what happened here from the beginning." Patricia's hands were visibly shaking now. "Well, when they approached the gate, I just thought, they looked so young and the seats were premium and I just..." "You just what?" David pressed. I didn't think they could afford those seats, Patricia finally admitted, her voice barely audible. The elderly black man who had stood up for the twins earlier approached the group. Son, I watched this whole thing unfold. These ladies didn't just question your children's tickets, they humiliated them in front of everyone here. They refused to verify their story, called them liars and scammers, and were about to have them arrested. David looked at the man with gratitude. Thank you for speaking up for them, sir. I wish I had been here sooner. We all tried to tell them they were wrong, the businesswoman with the laptop added, but they wouldn't listen to any of us either. More passengers began speaking up, sharing what they had witnessed. The picture that emerged was clear. 2 airline employees had subjected his children to discrimination and humiliation, refusing to believe their story simply because they didn't think black teenagers belonged in premium seats. David listened to every word, his expression growing more serious with each account. When the passengers finished speaking, he turned to address the crowd. I want to thank everyone who stood up for my children today, he said, his voice carrying across the entire gate area. The fact that strangers were willing to defend them, when airline employees wouldn't, shows me that there are still good people in this world. Several passengers nodded and smiled, while others wiped away tears. The twins stood close to their father, still processing everything that had happened. David then turned to the security officers. Officers, I appreciate you taking the time to verify the information. That's exactly what should have been done from the beginning. Of course, sir, Officer Martinez replied. We're sorry your children had to go through this experience. Finally, David faced Patricia and Janet directly. Both women looked like they were about to be sick. Ladies, David said quietly, I think we need to have a serious conversation about what happened here today. But first, my children have been through enough stress. They have a grandmother waiting for them in Atlanta, and I want to make sure they get on this plane. He looked at his watch. I also have some time before my next meeting, so I think I'll be joining them on this flight. Patricia's eyes widened. You're flying with them? Yes, David said with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. I want to make sure they have a smooth travel experience from here on out. I'm sure you understand. Janet nodded frantically. Of course, Mr. Thompson. We'll get them boarded right away. And you too, of course. Whatever you need. What I need, David said, is for my children to be treated with the same respect and dignity that every passenger deserves. What I need is for situations like this to never happen again. He put his arms around Jake and Zoe again. But right. Now what I need most is to get my kids on this plane so they can see their grandmother. The crowd of passengers began to applaud, first slowly, then building to a loud ovation. The twins looked around in amazement as strangers who had defended them smiled and waved. Even some of the airline employees who had gathered to watch were clapping. David guided his children toward the boarding door, where Lisa was waiting with a warm smile. Right this way, Thompson family. Let's get you on your way to Atlanta. As they walked toward the plane, Jake looked back at the gate area. One more time. Patricia and Janet were standing there looking devastated, while the passengers were still talking among themselves about what they had witnessed. Dad, Jake said quietly, what's going to happen to them? David paused for a moment, then looked down at his son. That's something we'll address after you're safely on your way to see Grandma Rosa. Right now, my priority is you two. But everyone in that gate area knew that this story was far from over. The flight to Atlanta was smooth and comfortable. Jake and Zoe sat in their premium seats, finally able to enjoy the experience they had been looking forward to for months. Their father sat across the aisle, occasionally checking on them, but mostly letting them process what had happened. Other passengers who had witnessed the gate incident smiled at them warmly throughout the flight. When they landed in Atlanta, Grandma Rosa was waiting at the arrival gate with the biggest smile and open arms. The twins ran to her and she held them tight, not knowing anything about the drama that had unfolded earlier. My babies, she exclaimed. Look how grown up you are flying all by yourselves. David hugged his mother-in-law warmly. Actually, Mom, I decided to surprise them and come along for the ride. That's wonderful, David, but don't you have important meetings? Nothing more important than family, he replied, glancing meaningfully at his children. After getting Grandma Rosa settled with the twins at her house, David drove to the airport hotel where he planned to spend the night before flying back to Chicago. But first, he had some important phone calls to make. His first call was to his wife, Dr. Rebecca Thompson, who was just finishing her surgery shift. David? I thought you were in meetings all day. How did everything go with the kids? Flight? David took a deep breath. Rebecca, we need to talk. Something happened at the airport today that you need to know about. He told her everything, from the moment he arrived at the gate to see his children being threatened with removal. Rebecca's voice grew angrier with each detail. They called our children scammers. They were going to have them arrested. I've already started documenting everything, David assured her. This isn't going to be swept under the rug. His second call was to the airline's chief executive officer, Linda Martinez. David, isn't this your day off? What's going on? Linda, I need to report a serious incident involving discrimination against passengers. My passengers. My children. There was silence on the other end of the line. Linda had worked with David for 5 years and had never heard this tone in his voice before. Tell me everything, she said quietly. David spent 20 minutes detailing the events at Gate B12. When he finished, Linda was quiet for a long moment. David, I am absolutely horrified. This is not who we are as a company, and it's certainly not how we treat any passenger, let alone the family of one of our executives. Linda, this isn't about me being an executive. This would be unacceptable, regardless of who my children are or who I am. But the fact that it happened to my kids means I have a unique opportunity to make sure it never happens to anyone else's kids. What do you want to do about it? I want a full investigation. I want to review our training procedures, and I want to make sure Patricia Williams and Janet Rodriguez understand that their behavior was completely unacceptable. Consider it done. I'll start the investigation first thing tomorrow morning. Actually, David said, I'd like to start it tonight. The next morning, David was back at Chicago O'Hare, but this time he was in the airline's administrative offices, not at a gate. Word had spread quickly through the company about what had happened. Employees who knew David personally were shocked and embarrassed that his children had been treated so poorly. Patricia Williams sat in the conference room, looking like she hadn't slept all night. Her union representative sat beside her, along with Janet Rodriguez and her representative. Across the table sat David, Linda Martinez, and the head of human resources. Patricia, Linda began. We've reviewed the security footage from yesterday's incident at Gate B12. We've also spoken with multiple witnesses, including passengers and airline employees. Would you like to explain your actions? Patricia's voice was shaky. I thought I was doing my job. I thought something was suspicious about their tickets. What specifically was suspicious? David asked calmly. Well, they were so young and the seats were expensive, and You just what? Patricia looked down at her hands. I didn't think they belonged there. Based on what? The room was silent. Everyone knew the answer, but Patricia couldn't bring herself to say it. David leaned forward slightly. Patricia, I want you to understand something. My children have flown with this airline dozens of times. They've always been polite, respectful, and well-behaved. Yesterday was their first time flying alone, and instead of helping them feel confident and safe, you made them feel like criminals. Tears started running down Patricia's face. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I never meant... You never meant what? To discriminate? To humiliate? To make assumptions based on the color of their skin? Mr. Thompson, Patricia's union representative interrupted. My client realizes she made an error in judgment. An error in judgment? David's voice remained calm, but there was fire behind it. She refused to verify information that would have taken 2 minutes to check. She called my children liars and scammers in front of a gate full of passengers. She was about to have them arrested. That's not an error in judgment. That's discrimination, plain and simple. Linda spoke up. Patricia, Janet, we've made our decision. Patricia, your employment with this airline is terminated, effective immediately. Janet, you're suspended without pay for 2 weeks, and you'll be required to complete comprehensive sensitivity and anti-bias training before returning to work. Patricia broke down completely. Please, I need this job. I have bills to pay. I made a mistake, but please don't fire me. David looked at her for a long moment. Patricia, I want you to imagine that those were your children standing at that gate. Imagine them being accused of fraud, being called liars, being threatened with arrest, all while they were just trying to take a trip to see their grandmother. How would you feel? I would be furious, Patricia whispered. Then you understand how I feel, but more importantly, you need to understand that this isn't just about my children. How many other families have you treated this way? How many other kids have you made feel like they don't belong? Patricia couldn't answer. After the meeting, David walked through the airport, stopping at various gates and customer service counters. He talked to employees about what had happened, not to embarrass anyone, but to start conversations about unconscious bias and fair treatment of passengers. 2 weeks later, David stood in front of 200 airline employees in the company's main training facility. On the screen behind him was a photo of Jake and Zoe at Grandma Rose's house, smiling and happy. These are my children, he began. 2 weeks ago, they were discriminated against by employees of this company. But I'm not here to shame anyone or point fingers. I'm here because we have an opportunity to do better. He clicked to the next slide, which showed statistics about customer complaints related to discriminatory treatment. This isn't an isolated incident. We get reports like this more often than any of us would like to admit. Today, we're launching a new training program called Every Passenger Matters. It's not just about following rules or avoiding lawsuits. It's about treating every single person who flies with us like they're someone's precious child, parent, or grandparent. The training program became a model for the entire airline industry. Other companies started adopting similar programs. David received letters from families who had experienced discrimination, thanking him for speaking up and making changes. 6 months later, Jake and Zoe flew alone again, this time to visit their uncle in California. At the gate, a young agent saw their premium boarding passes and smiled warmly. "First time flying with us?" she asked. "No," Zoe replied, "but it's our second time flying alone." "Well, you're going to have a wonderful flight. Let me know if you need anything at all." As they boarded the plane, Jake looked back at the gate agent who was helping an elderly man with his heavy carry-on bag. "You know what, Zoe?" he said to his sister. "What? I think things really can change when people decide to do the right thing." Zoe smiled and squeezed her brother's hand. "Dad always says that one person speaking up can make a difference for everyone." "Yeah," Jake agreed, settling into his seat. He was right about that. The plane took off smoothly, carrying them toward another adventure, but this time with the confidence that they would be treated with the respect and dignity every passenger deserves.